DC's secret Marvel advisor, Batman's teacher breaks the multiverse. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 71, Genius on the left, Madman on the right. The changes at Arkham Asylum did not go unnoticed by the various gangs of Gotham. Among them, there were those who coveted this piece of meat, but all their plans against Schiller had been foiled due to the intricate web of relationships he had skillfully exploited among the different gangs. Compared to Schiller, the gangs that had previously given Bruce so much trouble seemed somewhat lacking in intelligence. Their first instinct was to resort to assassination, a tactic they were well versed in. Even the smallest of gangs could easily hire a hitman or two. However, Schiller's dealings with Falcone had brought unexpected and substantial profits to the Godfather. With Falcone growing older, he was eager to leave more capital for his descendants. This windfall, therefore, held great significance for him. If this system could be maintained, Evans would secure a solid position in the industry he inherited from Falcone. As a result, Arkham Mental Hospital became impenetrable under the watchful eye of the Godfather. Schiller, in particular, received the highest level of protection, with top-notch security personnel hired at a premium. Schiller's irreplaceability lay in the potential Falcone saw for creating a new order. If this professor truly could bring about more significant changes to Gotham, the Falcone family could seize a crucial role in this new order. Among the local power players, the biggest snake was determined to protect Schiller, and the smaller snakes had no means to oppose Falcone. Falcone had ruled Gotham's underworld for many years, and even though he was aging, his influence was still formidable. The gangs were already weakened, and they couldn't challenge the Godfather head-on. Of course, killing Schiller was out of the question. Instead, they could find a way to remove him and replace him with one of their own. Not everyone possessed Falcone's foresight, but they all realized that sitting in Schiller's position could bring staggering profits. Besides the potential wealth from Schiller's rules, controlling such a place could exponentially expand their power overnight. They dared not confront Falcone directly or attempt to snatch the position from him, but they could engage in some covert operations. Gotham's gangs had their fair share of intelligent individuals, and among them were some who found Gotham University's chancellor, Selden. Selden, an outsider in Gotham, lacked any significant influence in the city. However, in Gotham, the rule was simple: you needed at least one gang standing behind you to speak with confidence. Selden had failed to grasp this, so when he rejected the gang's offers on the second day, he found himself shot on his way home from work. The gang spared his life, knowing he might still be useful. When he encountered the mob bosses in the hospital, Selden understood Gotham's most crucial survival rule: if you have a gun, you better have more bullets than the others; if you don't have a gun, then keep quiet and obey. Selden had a legitimate reason to summon Schiller back to the school. After all, he was the chancellor, and delegating some administrative work to the faculty was entirely normal. If Professor Schiller refused these routine assignments, he would be in the wrong. Selden came up with a flimsy excuse, feeling that Schiller's absence provided the perfect opportunity to make things difficult for him. However, on the second day of Schiller's return, he responded with utmost professionalism and efficiency. When Selden met him in the chancellor's office, he couldn't find a single fault. Schiller's excuse for returning was related to handling paperwork and other miscellaneous tasks while remotely monitoring the conditions at Arkham Asylum. Selden had enjoyed playing the role of a cloud player, observing Schiller's classes. This time, with Schiller back, he kept a close watch on the administrative office. What followed allowed Selden to witness the true nature of Gotham's seemingly ordinary residents. Over the next few days, Selden overheard conversations between Schiller and various leaders of the 12 largest gang families in all of Gotham. Schiller exchanged pleasantries with them at least 100 times in 3 days. What accompanied the mention of the mob bosses' names were terms related to various contraband items and coded references to smuggling locations. Most alarming of all, one day, Schiller casually remarked, "If this mayor isn't up to the task, we should replace him. Gotham's dreadful traffic is half his responsibility, and since he can't handle it, he might as well lose his life." Selden immediately considered packing his bags and leaving this damned city. As time passed, Schiller's conversations became increasingly outrageous, delving into the secrets of Falcone family's rise to power. This included hidden smuggling routes and lucrative ventures related to the plantation industry. Selden's unease grew as he listened. Though not a native of Gotham, his years in politics in other cities had honed his political instincts. At this moment, Selden realized that Professor Rodriguez, who taught psychology, was far more than just a professor. When something exceeds the boundaries of human comprehension, people tend to use their imaginative faculties to fill in the gaps. The brain automatically searches through various matching details in memory to substantiate these inferences, and Selden was no exception. He thought, no wonder Schiller had the audacity to send Bruce a notification of expulsion so confidently. This psychology professor might just be the puppeteer orchestrating Gotham's 12 major gang families from behind the scenes, the root cause of the current chaos in the city. The more Selden contemplated this, the more it seemed plausible. After all, Schiller's astonishing background didn't seem like something an ordinary person could possess. Moreover, his ability to effortlessly evade involvement in numerous homicides suggested the presence of a larger web he might have spun elsewhere. Selden felt like he was inching closer to the truth, but was Schiller an individual, or part of an organization? Whom did he represent? What was he doing? What results did he seek? These questions alarmed Selden, his mind racing with associations. In his logical assessment, it was somewhat normal for university professors to have some connection with the gangs, given the widespread influence of Gotham gangs. Most teachers and professors at the school had some degree of affiliation with the gangs, whether through relatives or friends working for them, or by providing professional services in exchange for safety and extra income. However, being a professor was not reason enough for someone to simultaneously interact with all of Gotham's major gang families and be involved in the Godfather's secret operations. The most compelling evidence reinforcing Selden's theory was Schiller's tone in their conversations over the telephone. Unlike others, he didn't sound fearful or obsequious to the gangs. His tone remained consistently calm, as if he held all the cards. Selden could sense that Schiller was the one manipulating the gangs, not the other way around. Selden felt himself ensnared in a colossal predicament. Schiller had the power to influence Gotham's largest gangs, yet he chose to continue teaching at Gotham University. It appeared that this position held some hidden advantages or knowledge that Selden was unaware of, attracting this mad professor. Indeed, from Selden's perspective, Schiller seemed like a genuine lunatic. Gangs were not docile entities, especially not Gotham's largest ones. The city's sins were nearly overflowing, and those who had navigated these treacherous waters for years were often tainted by the evil around them. To stand at the pinnacle of this dark city and collaborate with any of them was akin to making a deal with the devil. But Schiller went beyond collaboration, he attempted to control them all simultaneously. For someone like Selden, who had witnessed the brutality of the gangs, Schiller's actions seemed utterly insane. It was like cutting a single wire from a tangled mass of hundreds and thousands of wires. One wrong move, and the bloodthirsty wolves that dwelled within this chaos would descend upon the reckless individual and devour them entirely. Selden began to regret why he didn't just let Schiller remain in Arkham Asylum. After all, he had gone to great lengths to get him out, so why bring him back? It was as if he had thrown a timed bomb out, only to inexplicably retrieve it himself. At this point, Selden fervently prayed in his mind that Schiller's risky maneuvers would not end in disaster. If they did, he hoped it wouldn't affect Gotham University, and above all, himself. However, Selden had reached his current position through shrewdness. He knew that continuing like this was unsustainable, and he needed to take action. One morning, as Schiller went about his routine in the archive room, planning to work and remotely control his operations, he discovered that the previous day's backlog of at least 2/3 of the unfiled records had miraculously been sorted out. He examined the situation with a puzzled expression and confirmed that all the work had indeed been completed. What was going on? Had the sea snail maiden intervened? Nonetheless, with the work completed, there was no need to stay any longer. Schiller, still perplexed, descended the stairs and ran into the university's president, Selden. Schiller raised his coffee cup in greeting, but Selden, wearing a stern expression, didn't respond and walked right past him. Well, Schiller thought, it seemed the university president still held a grudge. But he was used to it. Ever since he had sent that expulsion notice to Bruce, the president hadn't given him a friendly look. What struck him as strange, though, was that the president, who usually exuded an aura of vitality and charisma, appeared weary today, with 2 prominent dark circles under his eyes. Episode 72, Geniuses on the left, Madmen on the right, 2, Schiller was summoned back by the principal. Even though he could control things remotely, he still needed someone to oversee the affairs of the psychiatric hospital. That responsibility fell onto Bruce. Schiller competently delegated all the work to Bruce. Bruce couldn't help but feel that Professor Schiller had more faith in him than he had in himself. He was just a freshman student, and he was taking over an atypical psychiatric hospital for his first internship. While this psychiatric hospital didn't have any real psychiatric patients, it was even more dangerous and troublesome than dealing with actual patients. When Bruce questioned his ability to handle the job, Schiller told him, "Sometimes, you don't realize you're a genius until you push yourself." On his first day of work, Bruce encountered a major problem: he couldn't distinguish one person from another. Even though he had memorized thick patient files, including all their names, room numbers, and corresponding medical records, which would have been more than sufficient for a regular hospital, this place was different. Behind the names and diagnoses in their files lay complex social identities. Who belonged to which gang? Which gangs had hostile relationships? Who used to be enemies, and who were now partners? None of this information was discernible from the patient files. Listening to Schiller talk about the telephone, Bruce had picked up some clues. His extraordinary memory turned these fragments into valuable insights. Without understanding everyone's social identities and relationships, he could deduce them from these clues. Moreover, Bruce was skilled at disguises. Just as he had concealed his playboy identity, here in the hospital, he became a billionaire who was carefree and affluent but yearned for the gang life. The identity of the world's richest person gave him certain advantages. Gang members didn't expect the world's richest person to approach them with ulterior motives. So, when Bruce showed an interest in gang stories, the gang leaders simply thought this young billionaire, like any wealthy heir, had grown tired of a life of comfort and longed for the excitement of the gang world. Thus, when they shared their stories, Bruce could still extract valuable information about gang society and relationships, even though he suspected they had embellished some of the tales. In a city where almost everyone had ties to a gang, understanding the intricate web of gang relationships meant uncovering the city's underlying structure. Bruce realized that the rules of survival in this city were far more complex than he had imagined. Starting with small gangs at the bottom, even a gang with just a dozen members had its own rules of survival. These small gangs often handled street patrols and petty crimes and paid protection fees to larger gangs that controlled them. Moving up the ladder, gangs with hundreds of members, considered mainstream in Gotham, often controlled one or two industries, such as shops or factories. They provided protection for these industries, controlled their smaller gangs, and occasionally engaged in small-scale shootouts when conflicts arose over customers. However, these conflicts rarely escalated beyond a few handgun shots fired from behind cars. Further up were the large gangs with several hundred members, each specializing in a specific industry vital for their survival. Bruce discovered that these gangs even had specialized subdivisions within their industries. At this scale, they often controlled smuggling routes or had complete production and distribution chains for specific products. Some excelled in dominating the majority of an industry, while a few managed to achieve near monopolies in certain regions or sectors. At this level, their daily profits were astonishingly high, but they also faced saturation. Moving higher up, they could no longer be called gangs, but should be referred to as criminal family organizations. These 12 gang families ruled Gotham, and aside from controlling their core forces, they didn't personally engage in business. Their role was to oversee the large gangs, each with dozens or hundreds of members, managing different businesses in various regions. When Falcone established the 12 families, he ensured that each family focused on a different industry. Falcone occupied the pinnacle of the pyramid, issuing commands to all the families and gangs. As Bruce collected and analyzed this information, he realized that despite Gotham's apparent chaos, it had a remarkably robust hierarchical structure. Wealth was extracted from criminal industries layer by layer, and then redistributed and produced at the top. Within this cycle, Gotham had forged its unique ecosystem, creating the largest gathering place for criminal industries in the United States. Moreover, Bruce discovered that contrary to his expectations, from the perspectives of sociology and economics, Gotham's industrial structure was surprisingly healthy. Both the allocation of industry sizes across different levels and the delineation of industry clusters were more efficient than in most other U.S. cities. As Bruce delved deeper into his investigation, he began to question his initial intentions. He realized that, despite its malevolence, Gotham was not impoverished, and the standard of living for most of its citizens was relatively high. Apart from the inherent danger, people here were quite affluent. During his travels across the United States, Bruce had also studied the living standards of people in various major cities. He found that the majority of people in this cursed city, Gotham, lived well above the poverty line. During his visits to the hospital, Bruce met an elderly man who had come from a nearby city. People called him Gunman. Originally, Gunman had come to the city with hostile intentions, but his daughter had married a small gang leader in Gotham. This gang leader was falsely accused, and Gunman's daughter was nearly harmed. When Gunman received a distress call from his daughter, he grabbed an old-fashioned shotgun and rushed to Gotham. With a few shots, he took down the gang members who were trying to harm his son-in-law. One of the 12 families, the Lauren family, saw potential in Gunman's violent temperament and skills. Now, he was the owner of a restaurant in the Lauren family's West District. Unlike other gang members, this old man had genuinely come to the hospital. He suffered from chronic headaches, seemingly a complication of anxiety disorder. So, his son-in-law used his connections to get him admitted for treatment. After 2 treatment sessions, he was already feeling much better. "It's all the same, everywhere," Gunman said, taking a drag from his cigar, leaning against the hospital bed, and addressing Bruce. "Do you think it's any better when you're storming the city? Everyone lives on clean streets, every household has a car to drive, and the kids go to school in their uniforms?" He took another puff of his cigarette, and this old man even had a hint of southern aristocracy about him, just like a true gunman. Amidst the cigarette smoke, he slowly reminisced, "I met Mary many years ago, decades ago. Back then, I was just a poor kid, fighting my way through the city with nothing but my bare hands. To besiege a city, you'll find gangs everywhere, won't you? I worked for them, but it couldn't compare to Gotham. I earned too little, sometimes not even a cent in my pocket. I wanted to marry Mary, but I had no money. How could we get married? So, I picked up a gun and started working as a hitman. That's when life started looking up. When my daughter was born, I was doing well. Even though I never read any books, if you ask me, Gotham is far superior. Bruce asked, is Gotham better than the city you wanted to besiege? If it weren't for the fact that this was coming from a seemingly knowledgeable old man, Bruce would have thought he was out of his mind. I know you gents with respectable backgrounds think this city is rotten to the core, full of gangs and criminals everywhere. But for people like us, it doesn't matter where we work, we give our all to whoever pays the most. In Gotham, as long as you're an official member of a gang, you actually earn quite a bit. And if you're like me, owning a restaurant or a bar, it's not much different from running a big business. Moreover, here, gang members are safer. There's a unique order in place, and if you don't want to declare war on a gang, it's best not to mess with their people, even if it's just a low-level thug. So, those who join gangs to make ends meet are actually safer here than anywhere else, because the gangs rule the roost. Once you're part of a gang, your words carry more weight. I know. Lai Fuqiang put down his cigarette and said, I'm well aware that being a hitman will lead to consequences. I'll go to hell, face the judgment of Satan, but I don't care. Do you know why? Before Bruce could respond, Lai Fuqiang continued, I need to fill my belly first, earn more money, and have a better life. God didn't place me in a comfortable family like yours. My father lost everything to gambling, my mother ran away with someone else, and my only possession was this old and unreliable gun. So, I thought, why not do this? What else can I do? After coming to Gotham, I realized that the people who built this city must have been geniuses. Don't you think these gangs are organized too perfectly? It's almost impossible for gangs to spontaneously organize these industries. So, how did this city become the way it is today? Could it be that someone intentionally designed it like this? What's their purpose? Do they have the ability to plan these industries so perfectly? Why turn it into a city of crime? Couldn't they do something else? Gotham is simply the oddest among all American cities. It runs smoothly in a strange and twisted manner, carving its own path to becoming one of the most prosperous cities on the East Coast. It's achieved high GDP rankings through an absurd approach, and people not only survive here, but thrive. Its creator must be a genius, turning chaos into order, creating a new model of city operation almost out of thin air. But at the same time, he must be a madman, using his crazy ideas to build the world's largest haven of crime. Bruce thought, maybe here, genius and madness are separated by a thin line, and Gotham is like the coin balancing between them, ready to topple at any moment. But it continues to teeter on that line. Everyone here, just like this city, is a double-edged sword. They are both gifted geniuses and unparalleled madmen. Genius to the left, madness to the right, and everyone in Gotham follows the traffic rules here. I go straight, I never turn. Episode 73, Gotham 1987, 1. The faint morning breeze rustled the tree branches outside the window, and the orange light seeped through the thick curtains, illuminating the dim room. A knock at the bedroom door roused Schiller from his slumber. He turned over as the butler outside announced, Sir, Mr. Gordon called you 10 minutes ago. I informed him that you would return his call after getting up. Schiller, his voice slightly hoarse, responded slowly, I see. He sat up in bed, shaking off the remnants of sleep, and approached the window. With one hand, he drew back one side of the curtain, revealing a milkman on a bicycle at the doorstep, ringing the bell. Soon, someone emerged to collect the milk bottles from him. This was Gotham, in the West District, and it was Schiller's new home in the city. Although the faculty apartments at Gotham University were decent, he had felt the need to buy his own house here. This part of Gotham was the Old Town area, distinct from the affluent Southern District. It was established by a group of UK nobility during the European migration to America. Consequently, most of the buildings here were traditional English manors. However, due to the city's development plans and the superior geographical location in the south, the wealthy eventually moved there from the west. Many of these old manors had been left abandoned, as the descendants of those nobles rarely chose to stay. Schiller had acquired one of the best preserved and most tastefully decorated ones at an excellent price. He didn't opt for a house in the southern affluent district, not because he couldn't afford it, but for a very practical reason: it was closer to Gotham University, his workplace. To commute from the southern affluent district, he would have had to drive a considerable distance, traversing a significant portion of Gotham City. What made it worse was that he would have to navigate through the congested downtown area, especially during rush hours. Therefore, no matter how luxurious the villas in the south were, they were not within Schiller's choice range. He was not Bruce Wayne, who could simply take a helicopter if traffic was congested. He didn't want to spend most of his day on the road, Choosing a classic manor in the West District had another advantage: it was less populated, relatively peaceful, and not bustling with activity early in the morning. On his days off, Schiller could enjoy a peaceful sleep. Most importantly, this location was far from Wayne Manor, and even further from the mountain where Bruce planned to build the Batcave in the future. In case Batman encountered the Joker and the range of the attack extended, it wouldn't reach Schiller's place. After a while, the butler entered, opened the curtains, and said, "Breakfast is ready, sir." Schiller nodded, took the glasses case handed to him, put on his glasses, and glanced at his watch. "When did Gordon call?" he asked. "About 25 minutes ago." Schiller turned his gaze back to the window, then went downstairs to have breakfast. Descending the wooden stairs, passing through a somewhat dim corridor, the dining room was at the far west end of the manor. As he entered, he found himself in a semicircular dining room with tall, arched windows. Deep green silk curtains hung on either side of the windows, and on the peachwood dining table, silverware sparkled in the faint morning light. The morning sun streaming in through the arched windows cast intricate patterns of light and shadow on the table. Schiller picked up the freshly ironed newspaper from his right. The printed ink on the newspaper was slightly smudged, with the topmost line reading, January 25, 1987, overcast with possible rain in the afternoon, Gotham Daily. Schiller had breakfast while searching the newspaper for the information he needed. The fonts in the papers of this era were often quite small, and the ink easily blurred, so he had to use a magnifying glass. After a while, the butler entered and said, "Mr. Gordon is here." Schiller put down his magnifying glass and looked up. Gordon was dressed in a brown overcoat and wore a beret. He entered the dining room, still carrying a lingering chill. Seeing Schiller reading the newspaper, Gordon said, "Have you seen today's news? The Godfather is furious and won't allow Metropolis ships to dock at the Eastern Pier anymore." "I was just reading that part," Schiller said with a slight push of his glasses. "I stayed up late writing my paper last night, so I missed your call this morning." Gordon took off his overcoat while speaking, handing it to the butler. "It's not urgent. You know, my work has been slow lately. I just wanted to call and congratulate you on your new home. Oh, by the way, my gift is still in the car. No rush. Have you had breakfast? How about joining me for a meal?" Schiller suggested. Gordon accepted the offer, taking a seat at the dining table. "I went to the precinct earlier this morning and had breakfast there. I brought the materials you asked for," he said, placing a black briefcase on the table and retrieving some documents from it. Schiller said, "Thank you. Even if you've already eaten, would you like a cup of hot milk?" Gordon didn't refuse. He sat at the table and said, "At first, when you mentioned taking over Lord Bernard's manor, I was a bit surprised. After all, not many people these days appreciate these old-fashioned manners. Nowadays, the wealthy in Gotham prefer those modern vertical houses, preferably with a large garage to park their luxury cars." Gordon looked around. The decor here was the epitome of English style, with silk curtains, knitted carpets, wooden furniture, and a stone fireplace in the corner, crackling with fire. Even from a distance, one could feel a warm atmosphere. The dining room of the old manor wasn't particularly large, and the corridor was rather narrow. The walls still bore extremely vintage metal wall sconces, creating an atmosphere as if they had traveled back to the Victorian era. Gordon withdrew his gaze and said, "But now, it seems this place suits you well." "It's not that I have a particular fondness for English manners," Schiller replied. "It's just that if I bought a house in the South, it would be too far from my workplace at Gotham University. The terrible traffic in Gotham might cause me to miss all my morning classes." Gordon picked up his cup and took a sip of milk. "Who isn't affected by it? Every time I go to the police station for work, I get stuck in that damn central roundabout. You know, I got the highest score in my driving class at the police training school. This cursed place, everyone drives like maniacs, and they never think about the fact that slamming the accelerator to the floor when there are hundreds of cars moving simultaneously in a roundabout might lead to them getting blasted out by the airbags." Gordon expressed his frustration. "I could tell you were stuck in traffic earlier," Schiller chuckled. "During my drive here, I saw at least 10 potential F1 champions," Gordon said, sounding a bit dejected. "Speaking of which, I heard you're getting married to your fiancée? Is she in Gotham now? When are you planning the wedding?" Schiller inquired. Gordon cleared his throat and replied, "She's in the process of transferring her job. The handover at the company in Metropolis is quite troublesome. It will take at least a week. But it's good in a way. It gives me some time to buy the apartment I've set my eyes on and surprise her." Schiller shook the newspaper in his hand, then spoke as he read, "Have you decided on what new wedding items you want?" "I have plenty of money now." "Really? More than Wayne?" Gordon asked. Schiller rolled his eyes and replied, "If I had more money than him, you wouldn't be seeing me here. To be honest, if I hadn't earned so much money, I wouldn't be thinking about getting engaged so soon. I might have been on vacation in Hawaii by now. I thought you worked year-round. Come on, I'd go crazy if I did that. I need a good body and a good mood to survive in this damn city for long. Schiller took a cigar from the box on the table, cut it open, and handed it to Gordon. Gordon accepted it, and Schiller lit it with a match provided by a servant. He took a drag from his own lit cigar and exhaled a puff of smoke, saying, "The Godfather has been in a bad mood lately. Some audacious folks are trying to cause trouble in his territory." Gordon adjusted his posture, leaning comfortably on the armrest of his chair, and sighed, "Why did you ask me to investigate the population movement in Gotham? Is there something wrong with Metropolis? I heard those troublemakers who angered the Godfather came from Metropolis. If I told you this trouble followed me, would you be surprised?" "Of course not," Gordon quickly denied. "When I first met you, I had a feeling you were someone who could get into big trouble." "Why?" "You could call it a detective's intuition." "Interesting. Can you elaborate?" "I've seen a lot of criminals, and they are different." Gordon straightened up, resting his wrists on the table, and continued, "Completely different from each other. The dumb thieves and the real masterminds are worlds apart. I've never heard of a serial killer shouting at a judge, being disrespectful. They have a different air about them. When you face Batman, I always feel like you two are looking in a mirror. Do you think I'm similar to him? Are you serious? Some things are completely different, but in some ways, it's astonishingly similar." Schiller looked at Gordon and said, "Keep this keen sense, and you'll become Gotham's savior." Gordon tapped the ash of his cigar on the silver tray and said, "The Godfather is in a tough spot this time. Those who infiltrated seem to know what they're doing. They killed 2 of Falcone family's bouncers. If the Godfather doesn't capture them quickly, he'll lose face in Gotham, which is worse than anything. Do you think the gangs will dare to challenge the Godfather so soon?" Schiller put down the newspaper and leaned back in his chair. "It's hard to say. Don't underestimate them. Maroni is still alive, and he profited from the East District conflict. He might be planning to challenge the Godfather. He's asking for trouble." As the smoke from the cigar settled, Schiller extended his hand and flicked the cigar's ash with his fingertips, creating a fine dust that slowly drifted down. "Not necessarily. The Godfather somehow crossed the line and had Victor, the former commissioner, killed. I heard he wanted to meddle at Arkham Hospital, but the Godfather kicked him out. Maroni can't stand that. The East District is restless. Maroni is eager to assert dominance over the forces he's absorbed. He needs a victory to consolidate the newly acquired power. If he dares to challenge the Godfather to establish dominance, Falcone will teach him a lesson." Schiller relaxed in his chair, tugging at his sweater's collar, looking quite at ease. Gordon coughed a couple of times, and through the cigar's smoke, he squinted at the reflection on the silver tray. "Maroni is a formidable figure, and the Godfather is getting old. Do you favor him more?" "No, I actually hope the old Godfather wins. As long as Falcone is around, Gotham won't descend into complete chaos. But once he's gone, who knows?" Soon after, Gordon left. After all, he had work to attend to, and it was his peak season. Another month of hard work, and buying a villa wouldn't be a problem. After Gordon's departure, Schiller leaned back in his chair, finishing the entire cigar. Smoke curled around his fingertips. He hadn't had such a relaxing moment in a long time. In this crisis-ridden city, he couldn't even have a break for a single cigarette without ensured safety. Before this, Schiller had never considered buying a house. He didn't need a home because he wasn't a Gotham native. He came from one of the world's safest and most orderly countries. As the cigar burned, the cigarette smoke became several times richer than the fragrant cigarette, dispersing into various elusive abstract shapes, provoking countless associations. In that hallucinatory and sweet-smelling haze, Schiller began to reminisce. He couldn't quite remember whether the emotion that surged within him when he first encountered a shooting incident in Chicago after leaving his homeland was shock or excitement. He only remembered that as the plane descended, his lifetime of memories, accompanied by weightlessness and oxygen deprivation, blurred into a fog. As they wished, these memories dissipated with death, burying countless secrets forever. If there truly were gods in this world, Schiller thought, this great being capable of granting a second chance at life truly understood him. Gotham was the sewer of the world's evil, and good people wouldn't be flushed into the sewer. Schiller looked at the tip of the cigar between his fingertips, where the flame gradually extinguished. The cigarette smoke began to thin, and the patterns it had formed slowly dissipated. He knew that the excitement that had filled his mind when he first regained consciousness and learned that this was Gotham City would ultimately destroy all his aspirations for a peaceful life. Or perhaps, his enjoyment of a mundane and ordinary daily life, filled with self-hypnosis, had been the delusion of a madman from beginning to end, until he saw Batman. As the cigarette smoke drifted away, Schiller recalled the feeling when he first used his faint telepathic abilities to touch Batman's inner thoughts. As Gordon had said, he felt like he was looking in a mirror. So, he gave Batman the answer he wanted to hear, and almost eagerly, he put a period on the tedious life that had driven him to despair. And now, he had finally become a citizen of Gotham, on the first birthday of his second life, in the winter of 1987. Episode 74, Gotham 1987, 2. In the afternoon, just as the weather forecast in the newspaper had predicted, Gotham was enveloped in a gentle rain. Schiller sat in the study at Manor, and the sound of rain outside the window acted as the perfect lullaby. Amidst the cluttered desk, stacks of books created undulating shadows in the light of the wall lamp. The glint of ink bottles and Schiller's eyeglasses reflected brightly in the dimly lit room. He held a pen and wrote elegant, ornate English script on an invitation. Customs around the world were quite similar. When you moved to a new place, it was customary to invite friends and family over. Schiller planned to invite his few friends in Gotham for a dinner gathering over the weekend. As the rain outside intensified, moist air seeped in through the window cracks. In the soft light, tiny water droplets could be seen gently falling onto the desktop. Soon, the part of the desk near the windowsill accumulated numerous tiny water droplets, reflecting the glow of the fireplace like red gemstones. As daylight gradually faded, the mist, colder than daytime, caused frost to form on the glass panes. Schiller put down his pen and rubbed his wrist, then looked up. From this vantage point, Gotham appeared unchanged, but the rain made it even gloomier and quieter, almost offering a rare tranquility. Regardless, the 1980s Gotham was always much slower paced than the later information societies. Schiller spent the entire afternoon writing letters and only left the study when a butler reminded him that it was dinner time. After finishing dinner, Schiller dressed, picked up his umbrella, and left the house. By this time, the rain that had lasted the entire afternoon had stopped, leaving behind the chilly and damp air that permeated the city. Puddles on the ground acted like mirrors in the darkness, reflecting the light from street lamps as golden fragments, like the leaves autumn had failed to take with it. As Schiller's shoes touched the water, the shimmering light disappeared into the gentle ripples and splashes. Just like any other custom when moving, it was essential to visit the neighbors. The security here was reasonably good because anyone who could afford and maintain a manor like this was either wealthy or prosperous. While it couldn't compare to the affluent neighborhoods in the south, the old city still had a slow-paced, old-fashioned charm. A street away from Schiller's manor, there was an opera house. Although it seldom hosted theater troupes, it had become a club for the residents. Schiller reached the theater's entrance, where the attendants weren't as professional. They waited until he reached the doorsteps before opening the door. Schiller removed his hat and entered. Despite the cold rainy night outside, the theater was warm. Schiller's glasses fogged up, and he removed them as he approached the front desk, tapping it lightly. The supervisor, who had been dozing off, blinked when he saw Schiller and quickly straightened up. He asked, "Do you have a reservation? I am the new owner of the Viscount Manor, and all the expenses for drinks here tonight will be charged to my account. May God bless everyone." The supervisor immediately became enthusiastic. "Oh, it's you. I just received the news yesterday that the largest Viscount Manor has a new owner. Your taste is truly exceptional. Only a man of your generosity is deserving of such a luxurious manor. Don't worry, by the time everyone comes out later, they'll know you're a friendly gentleman." Listening to the supervisor's effusive praise, Schiller discreetly placed a roll of dollar bills under the bell. The supervisor continued, "You need not worry about the appearance of this building. After all, this is Gotham's oldest theater. Some wear and tear are expected. But our service will always be top-notch." As Schiller descended the theater steps, he glanced back at the possibly oldest theater in Gotham, now marked by the passage of time. Many years ago, it had welcomed famous theater troupes and countless actors had performed here. But now, it lay deserted, its weathered facade serving as a monument to Gotham's history, bearing the marks of wind, frost, and rain. Perhaps it had a more intriguing story than the fictional dramas, but not many were willing to watch it again. When Schiller returned to Manor, it was already quite late, but there was something he hadn't finished from last night. Thanks to this relatively slow-paced era, Schiller didn't need to constantly guard against text messages or phone calls. He had ample time to leisurely read books, seek knowledge from physical materials, and then transcribe them onto paper with a pen. Suddenly, there was a faint sound behind him. Without turning around, Schiller said, "Gordon came to visit, and he at least brought a gift. What about you? The uninvited bat?" Batman's shadow cast multiple silhouettes on the wall under the sconces. He replied, "I'll deliver it during the daytime. Gordon is getting married soon. Aren't you planning to give him a gift in your peculiar costume? After all, he's your partner." "I have no gift to offer." Batman's tone was always low and calm, inducing drowsiness in the quiet room of the deep night. "So, what brings you here?" To wish you well in your new home. I guess you scoured every room in this manner earlier than I did. If I'm not mistaken, you might have even acquired the building's blueprints through some means. Batman remained silent. He seemed to acknowledge that he didn't shy away from displaying his overly cautious and distrustful nature in front of Schiller. Did you read the newspaper today? Did you see the news about the Iron Curtain? That's not relevant to me. It's a global event. Gotham won't change for the better or worse because of it. Then, both fell silent. Only the sound of Schiller's pen scratching against the paper echoed in the quiet room of the late night. After a while, Batman spoke, "The people who came from Metropolis are probably here to pursue you. Let them come. Or do you think the people of Gotham are afraid of those from Metropolis?" Batman remained silent. "I guess you had an argument with your butler, didn't you?" Batman didn't reply, but Schiller continued, "There was once a person who came out for a midnight drive because he had argued with his beloved butler. Why did they argue? Because that person couldn't decide whether or not to marry his butler." Batman fell silent once more. "I guess your butler must be feeling heartbroken over your injuries, but he doesn't want to hinder you from pursuing your passion. So, he keeps his emotions to himself. But you've noticed that he seems sad, and you don't want to give up your career or make him sad. Your extraordinary intelligence and logical reasoning don't work at this moment, so you resort to midnight drives. Let me guess, your new Batmobile is probably parked at my doorstep, and the overheated engine hasn't cooled down yet. Is there really such a thing as telepathy in this world? Don't ask such silly questions. If it exists, can you tell me what Alfred is thinking? You are much more straightforward than that person, but yes, besides family, love troubles him." Love? It's the most perplexing thing. I offered to tell him the answer, but he refused. Batman's gaze fell on the ring on Schiller's ring finger as he asked, "Are you married? Is your wife not with you in Gotham? It seems you're not very interested in that answer either." Schiller said, "Let's go. You'd better find Gordon to host you. Staying here, you'll only get answers you don't want to hear." Batman said, "This manor is indeed magnificent, with a total of 36 rooms. You sleep in the East Wing master bedroom upstairs, leaving 35 other rooms. I won't be giving you a key." "I don't need a key." Schiller pressed his finger against his forehead and said, "But you stay out all night. What should I do if your butler comes to me? Why do you seem more afraid of him than me?" "It's hard to explain, but I am genuinely worried about your butler coming to me." Seeing that Batman was relentless, Schiller reluctantly said, "All right, if you want to stay here overnight, I need your guardian's approval. Go call him now. I must hear his consent before allowing you to stay." Batman hesitated, then conceded. When it came to matters concerning his butler, he always acted like a child, much like Stark did when dealing with Pepper. Schiller didn't mind Batman staying here, and he didn't really mind Batman thoroughly checking his new home. After all, sooner or later, it was bound to happen. 18-year-old Batman might not check, but when he turned 28 or 38, he would inevitably investigate. Nothing in Gotham could escape the vigilant eyes of the Bat. Schiller wasn't the Joker, he didn't have the time to play hide and seek with Batman every day. A while later, Schiller finished writing his paper. It was now deep into the night, and the window outside was pitch black, with only puddles formed by the rain reflecting distant lights. Soon, the butler informed him that the telephone was ringing. Schiller picked up the receiver, and Batman was standing in the darkest corner of the living room, listening to him speak on the phone. "Yes, correct. No trouble at all. Yes, I know they're always like this. I've seen plenty before." "Really? That sounds quite serious. I have a professional first aid kit here." "Oh, I see. You're a responsible butler. I don't think there's any relationship." Schiller glanced at Batman for some reason. Batman felt his heart suddenly pounding, as if he were a student nervously trying to deduce his parents' anger levels from the teacher's vague words after being called to the principal's office. "All right, please rest assured. No problem. So, tomorrow morning, is it?" "I suppose so." "Very well. Goodbye." Schiller saw Batman about to ask something, but decided against it. Schiller said, "Your butler mentioned that you're injured, but he should have treated you already." Afterward, he glanced at the grandfather clock nearby and said, "It's already too late now. Your butler said you should have been in bed by 9, and it's already been over 3 hours late. Take your keys and go upstairs quickly." "I don't need the keys." With these parting words, Batman disappeared, and Schiller shook his head before heading upstairs. Schiller had always known Batman's true identity, so Batman didn't sleep in his bat suit. When Schiller knocked on his bedroom door, Bruce was in his pajamas. Normally, in his serious Batman persona, one could only see his chin, but now, Bruce's demeanor was entirely different from usual. This was a fully exposed Batman. But it didn't matter. When When Schiller reminded him that Alfred hoped he'd be back for breakfast tomorrow morning, a conflicted and complicated expression appeared on Bruce's face. I advise you to go back. If he comes knocking on your door, I won't help you. You should know that teachers will always stand on the same side as parents. Seeing that Bruce still seemed reluctant, Schiller had to threaten him further, saying, if I do meet Alfred tomorrow, I'll have to talk to him about your academic performance. Although you barely passed the last exams, your ranking is in the lower middle, and more importantly, you missed 6 assignments this semester, and half of them were not long enough. I've kept all the assignments you turned in. If you don't want your butler to see your incomprehensible essays and useless academic rubbish that only pollutes others' minds, you'd better go to bed now and wake up early tomorrow to return to Wayne Manor. Without waiting for Bruce to say anything, Schiller slammed the door to his room shut. That night, Bruce lay in bed, reflecting on recent events. Thanks to Schiller's ingenious industry connections, there had been many shootouts in the gangs recently, making Batman's work increasingly difficult. During the daytime, he was busy with investigations at the hospital, trying to unravel the complex relationships between the gangs. At night, he had to monitor the scenes of various shootouts to prevent them from getting out of hand and causing too much damage. The police had acquired heavy weaponry, which made them stronger, but it didn't mean the gangs had no means of counterattack. With the police using heavy firepower, the gangs naturally sought to resist with even more powerful weapons. This led to an escalation of the conflict, and Batman found himself involved in more intense gunfights before he could upgrade his equipment. This resulted in his bat armor, originally designed for handguns and cold weapons, being unable to withstand the damage from machine gun bullets and grenades. A few nights ago, Batman had been hit by a machine gun bullet. This kind of injury was far more severe than what handgun bullets could inflict. Machine gun bullets were as long as a palm, and luckily, Batman had only been grazed on the shoulder. If that bullet had hit him squarely, it could have caused much more serious damage. But it had still been a significant injury, arguably the worst he had suffered during his time as Batman. When he returned to Wayne Manor, he was barely conscious. It was his extraordinary willpower that had allowed him to make it back to Wayne Manor in the first place. Bruce had long known that he wasn't very sensitive to certain painkillers and anesthetics. He often woke up during anesthesia. This time was no different. In the middle of the surgery, he was half dreaming, half awake, and saw Alfred sitting alone beside the operating table. It was difficult for him to describe the expression he saw on Alfred's face at that moment. It caused his heart, which had rarely raced in many years, to clench. He suddenly realized that Alfred had changed. He had aged significantly, and compared to when his parents were still alive, he seemed much more resigned. Bruce also realized that his parents' death had not only affected him but Alfred as well. Perhaps, when Alfred realized that he was about to endure a similar ordeal again, he aged even more. Bruce lay in bed, and as he drifted into sleep, he couldn't help but think about Alfred's expression. What saddened him even more was that when he woke up from surgery, Alfred didn't say anything. He didn't try to stop Bruce from doing anything. He simply prepared breakfast as he always did, as if it were any other morning when Bruce had woken up from a nightmare. Sitting at the dining table, Bruce could hardly eat. He was Batman, but he was still human. It was rare for someone to maintain their composure and appetite in the face of such emotional turmoil. So he took a few bites hastily, almost as if he were fleeing, and left Wayne Manor. In reality, his first destination was Gordon's place, but he happened to arrive just as Gordon was leaving for Schiller's house. He followed Gordon all the way, even observing their entire conversation in the restaurant from outside the window. He also saw Schiller sitting alone, smoking an entire cigar. The professor seemed unfamiliar, and Bruce had never seen Schiller like this before. While Schiller had often appeared serious at school, this was entirely different. It was as if he were a different person, a stranger. Bruce thought that perhaps the Schiller he had known before was just a facade, much like himself. In this mad city, 2 lunatics played their respective roles, assuming ordinary societal identities and appearing as teachers and students troubled by everyday routines. Perhaps this wasn't a book of Pride and Prejudice, but rather a book of the actor's self-training. In this corroded, rotten, and decadent theater called Gotham, on the stage of Gotham University, the first act of this absurd drama seemed peculiar and comical. On Batman's first day of school, he encountered a stern and old-fashioned teacher who seemed like he wanted nothing to do with trouble. In an inexplicable counseling session, this teacher gave him the answer he most desired. And after the curtains fell on one scene after another, the 2 actors themselves finally met behind the scenes. Putting aside their societal roles, the composition of these absurd dramas wasn't a coincidence. Madmen always attracted madmen, and oddities often encountered oddities. It was simply a manifestation of like attracting like. Bruce lay in bed, drowsiness washing over him. In his half-dream state, he heard the muffled ticking of the clock downstairs in the manor, permeating his dreams. Apart from that, on this cold night in Gotham in 1987, all that could be heard were the almost imperceptible sound of the wind and the incessant crackling of the fireplace. Episode 75, A Plan to Drive Away Tigers and Swallow Wolves. 1. The clinking of knives and forks against the tableware filled the air, accompanied by the gentle sound of wine bubbles dissipating. Gordon raised his glass first and said, "Congratulations on your new home, Joe." Bruce, Harvey, Schiller, and Victor all raised their glasses and clinked them together. Schiller took a sip of the somewhat spicy wine and felt a warm sensation spreading through his chest. The fireplace cast its warm glow on the glasses, resembling burning fire. "You should have bought a house a long time ago," Harvey commented. "I've been saying it, no one should live in the teachers' dorms for so long. They don't even have a coffee machine there. I stayed there for just 2 nights, and my back hurt from the bed." "I think it's not bad," Victor added. "The hardware facilities at Gotham University are decent. Of course, it can't compare to this manor, but I hope you'll leave a room for me here." "You're welcome anytime," Schiller raised his glass to him. Bruce, slicing a piece of steak on his plate, chimed in, "You should leave a room for all of us. After all, I've left rooms for you all at Wayne Manor." "That would be enough," Schiller replied. "God willing, I'll be able to buy a big manor in my lifetime, and I'd be more than happy to leave a room for each of you," Gordon said, taking a bite of sausage. "How have you been lately? You should be saving up some money by now, right?" Harvey asked him. "My recent income has seen a slight dip, but it's still good." Gordon wiped his mouth with a napkin and continued, "The Godfather hasn't made any moves yet, but the other gangs are eager. It's probably the calm before the storm. When you've saved enough money, be sure to let me know." Schiller lightly tapped his fork against the plate and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I just think I can help you with your apartment choice. After all, before buying a house, I looked at a lot of materials. That works out perfectly. I've been struggling to decide which one to buy." "What do you think of the Pelican Estates?" "I actually prefer Jasmine Lane, but considering that we might want children in the future, it's a bit small and doesn't have a nursery." "Have you considered 9th Avenue? How about being neighbors with me?" Harvey asked with a smile. "Oh my, that's too far away, and most of the people living there are bachelors like you, right?" Schiller made a scoffing sound as he lifted his wine glass to take a sip. Gordon looked at him with some confusion, and Schiller chuckled, saying, "You've been too busy lately, you don't even know about something this big." "What's going on?" Gordon glanced at Harvey and asked, "Did I miss something? Is he not single anymore?" Victor inquired, "Have you officially started a relationship with Christine? If so, you might want to be discreet at school. You know, there are almost as many girls interested in you as there are guys interested in her." "Well, it happened last week," Harvey shrugged. Bruce looked surprised and said, "Really? Wow. You managed to win over the most beautiful girl at all of Gotham University so quickly. I thought you were just an old scholar." Schiller tapped the edge of his plate lightly with his fork again and said, "I hope you're not implying something. You sitting at this dinner table with me, is it because you scored only 69 on your final exams?" Everyone burst into laughter as the fire in the fireplace burned brightly. The reflections of the metal utensils on the dining table shimmered, emitting soft halos of light that overlapped and illuminated the entire room. After finishing their meal, the group sat on the sofa by the fireplace. Harvey was a bit tipsy and said, "Is this our bachelor night? Gordon is getting married soon, and before that happens, we can still have a night like this." "I should get going," Victor said as he put on his coat and hat. Schiller turned to look at him and said, "Take the bag by the door, there are 2 bottles of wine and a pack of cigars." "Oh, thank you. How can you bear to give me these Cuban goodies?" Victor opened the bag and asked with a smile. "I remember you mentioned that the past few days were your wedding anniversary." "Oh, sorry, we both didn't know," Bruce said. "Professor Fries, I'll send your gift to your office tomorrow." No need to be so polite," Victor smiled and said, "Honestly, I'm happy that you all understand me. After all, freezing my wife in a cryogenic chamber is quite a scary thing. I never expected anyone to understand this crazy act of mine. People I heard about it before either just advised me that everyone faces life, aging, sickness, and death, or told me to accept it. But his new friends in Gotham had shown remarkable tolerance and didn't shy away from the topic. In fact, they didn't treat him with sympathy, which Victor appreciated. He didn't like it when others looked at him with pity, making him feel like a pariah every time the subject of marriage and family came up. But his friends were different. To them, his wife was simply in the hospital with a minor illness, and they never forgot her presence. This brought Victor a sense of comfort, as if his wife was just temporarily unwell and would recover soon. After Victor left, Gordon soon followed suit. Bruce leaned back on the sofa and said, "See, all of them are so busy. It's just us idle folks, who can get drunk like this." It's only you, Mr. Billionaire, Harvey added as he put on his coat. I still have a lawsuit to write, and you know Harvey has papers to modify. It's only you, the brain-dead billionaire. Bruce reclined on the sofa, closed his eyes, and waved his hand, not saying anything more. It was evident that he had had quite a few drinks. Harvey draped his coat over his arm and said, I'll take him back. Let's not let him get too drunk here. He has a mobile phone in his pocket. Find it and call his butler to send a helicopter to pick you guys up. Don't drive, Schiller advised. In Gotham, what's a DUI? I can still hit 120 miles per hour. Bruce slurred. Yeah, our genius racer. After Harvey had taken Bruce away, Schiller walked to the other side of the living room and picked up the telephone handset to dial. Soon, the lights in the manor gradually dimmed, and Gotham's night plunged into profound darkness once again. The next day, Selden, the principal of Gotham University, sat in his office, arms crossed, and said with a puzzled expression, You're saying Professor Rodriguez is hospitalized and injured? Well, send a colleague to check on him. In the afternoon, lying in the hospital bed, Schiller took the flowers from Anna's hands and said, Oh, thank you, I'm truly grateful. Just as he was about to continue, Gordon burst in. Seeing outsiders here, he hesitated. After Anna left, Gordon looked around, taking in the luxurious decor of the high-end hospital room in the center of Gotham, a single room. Schiller lay in the bed, covered by a blanket, and his face showed no signs of injury. Gordon approached, hands on his hips, and said, I heard you were attacked last night, damn it, I should have arrived a bit earlier. Schiller smiled, seemingly unfazed. Gordon said, somewhat irritated, You're actually laughing about it, and you knew those people from Metropolis were likely after you. You didn't raise your guard and let them succeed. Where are you injured? Organs or bones? Then, he added, quite frustrated, and where's that Batman? If he had stayed with you, this wouldn't have happened. You have quite the faith in him, but I don't want him crashing at my place. His butler is scarier than anyone else who might show up. Seriously. Gordon looked Schiller up and down. Are you really injured? I can't see a thing. He glanced at his watch and said, We left the scene late at night, and it's just past 7 a.m. now. Did your wounds magically heal this quickly? Even if it was just a knife graze, it should have taken at least a dozen hours, right? Or is the medical technology at the central hospital this advanced now? Schiller waved a hand, indicating for him to calm down. He then lifted the blanket, sat up, and got out of bed, walking to the window with a lazy stretch. Gordon stared wide-eyed, watching him move effortlessly as if nothing had happened. Damn it. You're not injured at all. Gordon exclaimed. I rushed here after getting the message in a hurry. I'm touched, Schiller said. Your old pickup managed to get from the police station to the hospital in just 20 minutes. Did you install a propeller on it or something? I told you, I was the top of my class in the police driving course. Gordon shook his head and said, Is that the point here? Isn't the real issue why you pretended to be injured? Are you finally fed up with those students at Gotham University? Of course not. Well, okay, maybe a bit, but that's not the point. Do you know how I got this information? This morning, the police station was in an uproar because they heard that Arkham Asylum is temporarily closing due to a lack of a chief physician. I've never seen them so upset. Yeah, Arkham Asylum closing is causing grief, not just for the police. Frowning, Gordon, not one to be slow, said after some thought, the gangs won't just give up because of this. They've invested a lot in this industry inside the mental hospital. They won't willingly stop, it's like the final step in making a pizza, they won't stop. You being injured will make them try to find out what happened. The police already know it's you. Those mob bosses won't have a reason not to know. But how can you be sure they'll go after the people from Metropolis and not try to replace you with someone else, as they did before? You're injured, but that doesn't mean the mental hospital has to close. They don't know this is your plan. They might just think, well, if the chief physician is sick, we can get a replacement, can't we? They indeed don't know, but Falcone does. That's enough. Episode 76, Driving Away Tigers and Swallowing Wolves Plan 1, I knew it. They think they can do whatever they want just because the Godfather is getting old? Well, then I can only say they're in a hurry to die. In a bar in the East District, a man with a big beard held a cigar. He was the second in command of the cocaine gang. The bartender brought a glass of water cut with whiskey to him. The bearded man took a sip of the whiskey and then drew on his cigarette. As he exhaled a puff of smoke, he continued, They haven't experienced those times, they don't understand. The Godfather only wants loyalty. He tapped the bar's desktop with his finger, emphasizing his point. He's telling us that if we want a share of this place, we must follow his orders. Just like what he did many years ago, how he united the entire Gotham gang and established the 12 families. Those young and reckless ones will never understand. The man sitting across from him was skinny, not as imposing, with a pale and gloomy complexion. He was the owner of this bar and a member of the four giants of the Hui Xing gang on Elizabeth Street. Taking a drag from his fragrant cigarette, he added, "My boss once told me, our big boss was the Godfather's first leader, and he used to work under him. That bunch of mixed bloods from Metropolis, thinking they've challenged the Godfather. When the Godfather doesn't make an immediate move, they believe he's scared. They're so naive, the Godfather won't take action himself." "He doesn't need to," the bearded man said. "Gotham is no longer the era when the big leader needed to pull the trigger himself. He's telling these gangs that even though he's old, as long as he's alive, he will forever be the underground king of Gotham," the skinny man stated. "A chief doctor got injured, and the mental hospital shut down? Only those greenhorn kids who just entered the business would believe such a story. What a load of nonsense. The chief doctor, my foot. Who needs a chief doctor there? Go and cure that guy on the street with the rooster's crest who shivers at the sight of eggs." The skinny man and those around him burst into laughter. The bartender wiped glasses while chiming in, "You can find a chief doctor anywhere now. I think I could do it too. It's just counting and writing medical records, there are no real patients there. So, that's why I said it's all a bunch of lies." The Godfather deliberately cut off this industry so that the gangs would understand that if they want to make money with him, they have to listen and help him deal with those enemies, or else they can forget about making money. The bearded man took another sip of his drink and grinned. "Many years ago, the Godfather did just that. He had 2 poppy plantations and threatened the gangs in the downstream industry to take care of the biggest troublemaker back then, that Anton. That was a huge deal. If he could really get his hands on the products from those 2 plantations, he would make a fortune. But as you all know, the Frenchman's head was placed on the Godfather's desk the next day. They won't live much longer," the skinny man said grimly. "The sissies from Metropolis should go back to their own turf and stay out of Gotham's business." "Go back? I'm afraid they won't have a chance to go back. They're doomed." On the other side, Schiller was in the hospital, holding a telephone. "Yes, thank you for your concern. I went in for some rest, that's all. Yes, just needed some recovery. I really didn't expect." As soon as he hung up the phone, a nurse walked in carrying a large bouquet of flowers. "Seems like it's from the Lauren family. Put it over there, thank you. By the way, please take these other bouquets away, they're getting a bit wilted." The nurse tidied up the area around the hospital bed, filled with flowers and gifts from various gang families. She couldn't help but remember the conversations she had with her colleagues in the corridor. Even if the Godfather was sick, did it really warrant such a grand display? Schiller, however, was in good spirits. He was on paid leave, and in just a couple of days, he had received dozens of pounds of expensive red wine and cigars. He didn't know who leaked the fact that he enjoyed cigars, but now his manor was filled with cigars worth millions. The idea of pretending to be ill had struck him one morning, and he didn't need anyone to remind him that the people from Metropolis were coming for him. Previously, when the hired assassins came with their employer's money to kill him, he had managed to persuade them to leave. But the mastermind behind them wouldn't give up so easily. Perhaps it was because of the failed assassination attempt that he couldn't hire a renowned lone hitman, and instead, he had gathered a gang of criminals from who knows where, intending to engage in a group battle. According to conventional wisdom, Schiller should have started a battle of attack and defense against them by now. After all, in a city like Gotham, it was unlikely that he could rely on the police for protection. With the enemy lurking in the shadows while he remained exposed, Schiller could only hire top-notch bodyguards or arrange for round-the-clock protection. Even if he used gray mist to locate their positions, Schiller had to be cautious to eliminate a few of them who were separated from the group. However, that would be too foolish, Schiller thought. He didn't want to lower himself to the level of those criminals and be defeated by their extensive experience. Since the mastermind could afford the Reaper, the gang he had brought must have had some capabilities. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to Gotham and killed the Godfather's people. Hiding, being on guard against potential assassinations every day? Schiller would not go down that path. So, after informing Falcone, Schiller faked an injury, and not just any injury, but a significant one. He needed an extended period of rest, he said, and claimed that he was in a bad mood and unable to think clearly. His injury was not a big issue, but with the mental hospital closing down due to the lack of a chief doctor, who among the mob bosses could sit still? The mental hospital had been running for a long time. The first few individuals who had ventured into this business were now rolling in wealth. Those who had followed later had invested significant time and money in this endeavor, seeing it as a lucrative opportunity. They were on the verge of reaping the rewards when it all came crashing down. How could they be happy about it? The ones who had already made money were even less pleased. Without having to risk gunfire, they could simply negotiate a profit-sharing agreement with Schiller and collect money while sitting back. Who wouldn't want such a deal? They had already earned a lot of money and wanted to earn even more. Shutting down at this point would be a loss, wouldn't it? On the first day the mental hospital announced its closure, all the telephones were ringing off the hook, including Bruce's. During the period when Schiller returned to Gotham University, Bruce was overseeing the entire hospital. Although Schiller had not consulted Bruce in advance about his plan, Batman being who he was, it took him only a few seconds to discern Schiller's intentions. As a result, the world's richest person immediately took center stage. All the gang leaders who had attempted to subtly gather information by calling him on the telephone were met with Bruce's evasive trifecta: "I don't know, I'm not sure, I can't make sense of it. I'm just a billionaire with nothing to do and an empty head," he continued. "What use do you have in asking me? You might as well ask Evans." Evans was also making a decent living within the hospital, being the son of the Godfather. Naturally, he was aligned with this group of gang leaders, so they had no choice but to make another call to Evans. However, Evans expressed his predicament, explaining that this was his father's decision, and he couldn't interfere. With that revelation, the gang leaders understood. This wasn't just an assassination attempt, it was the Godfather's way of sending a message. The Godfather's reputation was on the line, and no one would come out of this unscathed. Those individuals from Metropolis who dared to disregard Gotham's rules while others stood by watching were putting everyone's profits at risk. The gang leaders realized that the Godfather was indeed warning them. If they wanted to continue profiting together, they needed to show sincerity. "Point us in the right direction, and we'll take it from there," they thought. After careful consideration, the gang leaders came to a decision. Those who had come from Metropolis were clearly just interlopers. "Find them immediately and dispose of them," they ordered. "No need to keep them alive, just bring us their bodies." The ferocity of the Gotham gang needed no further explanation, especially when their true interests were threatened. Everyone involved in this matter was on a relentless pursuit, seeking to confront the outsiders. Originally, this group had identified their target in Metropolis a few days after arriving, namely Schiller. However, they hadn't acted yet, choosing to wait until everything was perfectly set up. Schiller had moved out of Gotham University, and they were on the brink of executing their plan when he suddenly got injured. What? He was attacked by outsiders from Metropolis? Metropolis outsiders? But that's us. We haven't done anything. The Metropolis criminals were now in an extremely awkward position. They had faced all sorts of strange situations over the years, but this was the first time they had been framed. "We haven't done anything. It was his own doing. What does this have to do with us?" However, it was clear that this situation couldn't be explained away. If you wanted to find evidence proving their innocence, that might be feasible. But how could they prove their innocence when people were lying in the hospital? When the victim says who attacked him, that's who attacked him. Furthermore, even if they hadn't done it, if the Godfather said they did, then they did. Initially, they had prepared a bomb at Schiller's manor and found a good place nearby to stake out. Their plan was to lure Schiller there. However, things took a turn for the worse when all the gangs in Gotham started looking for them. The location where they had been staking out was discovered, and they had to move. They had initially caught the Godfather off guard, but that was in a sneak attack scenario. Over these past few days, they had witnessed how the Gotham gang was using the firepower of a small-scale war in a shootout. Where in Metropolis would you find such an army? Now that these gangs had united and were no longer fighting amongst themselves, they were coming after them. Looking at the rows of machine guns on armored vehicles, everyone wielding rocket launchers, and even a few rocket artillery vehicles, who wouldn't feel their hearts racing? Even if you stomped your feet, it wouldn't help. So, now, these outsiders had become the ones who were desperately hiding and evading capture in the east of XC. The Gotham gang seemed uninterested in capturing them, instead, they found every location where they had hidden and obliterated it with rockets. They didn't want captives, they wanted corpses, even if not in one piece. When it came to the level of madness among the gangs, there was no city in the world that could compare to Gotham. And when these crazed gangs united to target a single objective, the extent of that objective's suffering became all too apparent. The frequent shifting of strongholds brought not only logistical challenges like dwindling supplies and a lack of daily necessities, but more importantly, whenever they were on the verge of capture and needed to retreat, they had to leave someone behind as a rear guard. After several transfers, they had already lost several skilled individuals, and their group, which had originally consisted of over a dozen people, had dwindled to just a few. They wanted to abandon the mission and escape, but the Gotham gang wouldn't give them that opportunity. It was unclear who had spread the word, but whoever presented their invitation letter first would receive the largest piece of the pie. With profit as their driving force, and the word opportunity on their minds, the gangs were all going crazy, eager to capture them and claim their rewards. Episode 77, a cunning plan to drive out tigers and wolves, 2. Of course, expecting all of Gotham to unite and follow the Godfather's orders as one was impossible. The city was rife with rebellious elements, and among them, the standout troublemaker was Salvatore Maroni. Maroni was an ambitious man, a fact evident in the name he gave to his gang. In Gotham, not every gang had the privilege of bearing a family name. Originally, only the Falcone family could do so, but now, all 12 gangs established by Falcone carried family surnames. The rest of the smaller gangs were named after their respective aliases. Naming a gang after one's own surname was a great honor in Gotham, mainly because Falcone was the first to do so and had achieved unparalleled success. By doing this, Maroni signified that he had ambitions to challenge the Godfather from the very beginning. After the Red Crow gang was eliminated, Maroni devoured most of its remains, and he even wiped out another gang that had opposed him for so long on the streets of the East District, leaving them almost powerless. He wanted to go even further, especially because he knew that the Godfather was growing old. The transition of power within the Falcone family was the ideal opportunity. Falcone delegated many responsibilities to Evans. While Evans was intelligent, he lacked the cunning and ruthlessness of the old Godfather. The two bartenders attacked by the outsiders from Metropolis were part of Evans' attempt at reform. Maroni keenly sensed the Godfather's waning power. Young Falcone was still inexperienced, torn between his desire for reform and the absence of the old Godfather's decisive methods. While he wanted stability, he lacked the seasoned expertise needed to achieve it. Maroni saw this as the perfect opportunity to deal a fatal blow to the Falcone family. Maroni speculated that the Godfather wouldn't go all out to pursue the killers. Though losing face might undermine his authority, the Godfather was already aged. At this crucial juncture, the transfer of power was more important than saving face. Distraction could lead to chaos, and Falcone wouldn't risk that. Initially, Maroni had planned to exploit the situation further to erode the Godfather's authority. He even contemplated impersonating individuals from Metropolis to attack the Godfather's other ventures. However, unexpectedly, Schiller ended up in the hospital, and the gangs went on a frenzied pursuit of the killers. This situation left Maroni in a bind. He had thought that if the Godfather pursued the killers, it wouldn't concern him directly, as long as the Godfather's attention was occupied. Maroni would then find an opportunity to encroach on Falcone family's territories. Maroni was a bold man who believed that the Godfather's rule was not unshakable. Even if it were, he wanted to take a bite out of him. But what took him completely by surprise was that the entire city of Gotham was in turmoil. Almost every gang had started digging deep. In this chaos, Maroni was unsure of his next move. If he acted now, would the Godfather turn his fury against him? Maroni intended to strike by surprise, not to challenge Falcone family openly, as he knew he couldn't win. However, if he didn't act now, Maroni had already made some subtle moves. If this situation passed without him establishing a solid foothold, the Godfather would settle scores with him, and it would be the end of him. Just when he was torn, something unexpected happened. The leader of the gang of criminals approached him. These unfortunate individuals originally operated as terrorists in the Middle East region, working as hired mercenaries for years. They had been lured to the East Coast by another contract, but ended up taking another job from Metropolis. Their employer was generous, so they worked diligently. However, Gotham proved to be an unforgiving place, and they were chased all over the city, battered and bruised. With the peers under gang control, they couldn't escape. Desperate, they had no choice but to seek an alliance with their enemy's enemy. Maroni's provocations against the Godfather were well known, even to Commissioner Gordon, and these criminals were well aware of them too. They wanted to strike a deal with Maroni. If he agreed to help them leave Gotham, they would eliminate a problem for Maroni before departing. Maroni initially hesitated to make this deal, but he realized that these individuals had survived for so long amidst the gangs of Gotham, which meant they had some formidable skills. With such a group of assassins at his disposal, Maroni could expand his operations significantly. Of course, Maroni had no intention of using this group to assassinate the Godfather. It would be futile, and they wouldn't agree to it. Instead, he turned his attention to another key aspect of the Godfather's newly developed industry, the police. Maroni knew that the Godfather was reaping substantial profits from this new industry chain. If this continued, Falcone family's rule would remain unchallenged, and Maroni would have no opportunities. Therefore, he had to disrupt this industry chain and prevent the private prison model controlled by Falcone from generating further profits. Police and judges were crucial components of this industry chain, as they were needed to arrest individuals legally and subsequently send criminals to mental hospitals for evaluation and treatment. Falcone exerted great effort to protect Schiller, primarily because he felt that Schiller lacked self-preservation skills. However, Schiller had provided the police with substantial firepower, so Falcone refrained from further scrutiny. After all, being a cop in the treacherous realm of Gotham required a certain level of competence. With sufficient weapons and cooperation, self-preservation should not be an issue. Maroney had his sights set on Gordon. Initially, in dealing with the former Commissioner Victor, Maroney had chosen to support Gordon's takeover. At the time, he didn't really understand this cop, nor did he feel the need to. Gotham's police force seemed pretty uniform, and collaborating with gangs was a norm. Even the clerks pouring tea in the office had a gang affiliation. Maroney believed that since he had supported Gordon's rise, a simple talk should be enough to make Gordon work for him. While switching sides from the Godfather's industry chain was risky, having this gang of criminals on his side meant he had options, both soft and hard. Gordon, at this moment, was delighted because his fiancée, Barbara, had finally arrived in Gotham. He and Barbara had met at the Chicago Police Training School. At the time, he was just a rookie officer, while Barbara was an intern lawyer. They had worked together on the same case, fell in love, and got engaged. Then, Gordon took the job in Gotham, and they were forced into a long-distance relationship due to their tight finances. They couldn't quit their jobs or think about marriage and starting a family. But now, Gordon's financial situation had improved, and they chose to live together in Gotham. On this day, Gordon returned home from work as usual. Although there hadn't been any extra income recently, Barbara had some savings. Together, they had enough to buy a nice apartment. They had made plans to visit a house that evening, and if everything went well, they could move in within 2 weeks, leaving behind their cramped old rental. Upon returning home, Gordon heard Barbara in the kitchen, and the aroma of food wafted through. After he took off his coat, he asked, "What have you made?" "It smells amazing." "Your favorite roasted lamb ribs." Barbara blinked, and Gordon put his arm around her shoulder as they walked into the dining room. "My friend gave me a great suggestion. I contacted the landlord of the Pelican Park Estates. We can go see the house there tomorrow. If we like it, we can pay the deposit and move in right away." "That's fantastic," Barbara said. "You know, I didn't come from a well-off family. I've never lived in a luxury apartment before. Does that house have a nursery? I really want a daughter, my little princess." "Of course, I want the same." Gordon kissed Barbara's cheek and then they sat down to eat. "I want our daughter to learn dancing. I originally wanted to be a dancer myself, but I never got the chance." "If you had become a dancer, you might never have met me," Gordon chuckled. "I think our daughter should be free to choose what she wants to do. Whether it's dancing, painting, or becoming a brilliant lawyer like you." "Come on," Barbara made a helpless expression. "This job is exhausting. I don't want her to become a lawyer. I hope she has an easier life. Dancing is the same way. You're just drawn to it because you haven't experienced it. I've seen those cheerleading squads at Gotham University, and some dance students complain that it's a youth job. They say it's easy to become unemployed as you get older. You really make me feel the pressure. What if our children don't do well? You have to have confidence in her, and how she turns out is her choice. Even if she becomes a cop in such a dangerous city like you?" "Oh, dear," Gordon said. "Don't say that. I know, you've told me before. Your dream is to be a cop because you were born in Chicago, another dangerous city. A cop saved your mother, and you want to be a cop who upholds justice. But this job is really dangerous. I've said it more than once. We can go live in my hometown together, even if money is tight. At least it's safe." Gordon sighed. He knew Barbara had a point. With the money he was making now, they could buy a villa in the Arizona countryside. He could find a job as a deputy sheriff, and Barbara could work as a legal consultant. It would be peaceful and happy. But even though Gordon knew Gotham was a hellhole, he just couldn't bring himself to leave. He believed that if the police couldn't stay in the most dangerous places to protect people, what was the point? Episode 78, Heart as Stubborn as a Stone, 1. On a rainy night in Gotham, the rain was always fine and persistent, carrying a bone-corroding, soul-devouring chill. Under the glare of the streetlights, the raindrops resembled a hazy, gray web. As they approached the ground, each drop created tiny splashes. The sound of an engine started at the end of a dark alley. Accompanied by the faint sound of water, the subtle noises of tires rolling over uneven pavement grew closer. When the blinding headlights appeared at the back door of the police station, Gordon knew trouble was on the horizon. A stretched luxury car pulled up in front of Gordon. He saw the reflection of rifle barrels in the car's window glass, and a person inside the rearview mirror nodded at him. No words were exchanged, the entire process unfolded in silence, much like Gotham's night. Gordon took a deep breath and reached for the handgun holstered at his waist. Though it had just been fitted with new parts, it offered him no real sense of security. In this city, the police couldn't rely on their guns for authority or even self-preservation. A man in a black suit stepped out of the car and opened the door for Gordon. Gordon checked his watch. It was now 9:12 in the evening, and he was going to miss dinner with Barbara again. In the end, Gordon got into the car. As the vehicle started, he gazed out the window. Neon signs of stores flashed by in his field of vision, leaving behind streaks of red and blue brilliance at the intersections. Raindrops splattered against the car window, blurring these faint halos of light. Gordon asked, "Who am I here to meet?" "You'll find out when you meet them," the person in the passenger seat replied. As the car drove down a somewhat rough road, it swayed slightly, and the headlights blinked onto different buildings. Soon, it turned into an alley that Gordon had never been to before. He knew this place was in the East District, the most dangerous fringe of the East District, to be precise. He got out of the car, and the man in the black suit led him to the entrance of a mansion. Two people stood in front of the door, both holding guns. One of them approached Gordon, who crossed his hands over his forehead. The person took away his gun and conducted a quick search, ensuring there were no weapons. After that, Gordon followed his guide inside. The mansion was lavishly decorated, brightly lit on the inside, but it was sparsely populated. Gordon went upstairs, and as the guide opened a door, Gordon saw a rather burly figure. He knew it was Sal Maroney, the new leader of the East District. Maroney turned around. He wasn't particularly handsome, and he had a menacing appearance. The corners of his mouth always turned downwards, while the corners of his eyes seemed to perpetually arch upwards, giving him a sinister look. He twirled a ring on his hand and said, "Commissioner, please have a seat. I apologize for inviting you so abruptly." Gordon's response was impolite, and he didn't sit down as Maroney had suggested. Instead, he stood upright. Maroney's expression fluctuated, but he didn't seem to mind Gordon's disrespect. He said, "I invited you here to discuss business, as gangs often do. I don't do business with gangs." "Oh?" Maroney chuckled. "That's quite novel. I've heard some of your colleagues complain that my offers weren't generous enough, but I've never heard of anyone refusing to work with a gang. The fact is, I don't collaborate with any gang." "Then why are you involved in the Godfather's business? Your outdoor task force must be making money from his private prison operation, right?" "I'm just doing my job as a cop. Combating crime is a policeman's duty," Gordon replied. He spoke the truth. Even if he knew that the criminals he apprehended were increasing the Godfather's revenue, his actions were aimed at capturing criminals. If this work happened to be profitable for him, all the better. But if not, Gordon would continue to uphold his duty. After all, before this business came along, he had been doing it this way, and he was the only one who had. "My conditions are quite simple. You don't have to do anything, just delay and find various reasons to hinder the outdoor task force from going out." Maroney spread his hands and said, "It's so simple. All you need to do is nothing, and I'll offer you a satisfactory price for it." Gordon noted, "I can see you've been trying to imitate the Godfather. I've never met Falcone himself, but I know there are plenty of poor imitators here in Gotham. They try to mimic his eloquent speech, politeness, and even his Italian accent. But it won't work, Mr. Maroney. You're not Falcone, and there won't be a second Falcone in Gotham, at least not now. Gotham belongs to the Godfather, not you." Maroney's expression darkened completely because Gordon had hit a nerve. He was indeed trying to emulate Falcone, or as Gordon put it, there were too many people in Gotham trying to mimic the Godfather. Even though they hadn't completed high school, they imitated Falcone, using highly refined language to twist simple sentences into complex, grammatically intricate ones. They wore suits, tied ties, pinned flowers to their lapels, and held pens instead of handguns, just like the Godfather. Falcone was like a benchmark for the city of Gotham. The charisma of the Godfather was so powerful that all the mob bosses were imitating him, and Maroney was no exception. When you arrive in Gotham, you'll be quite surprised. The gangs here don't employ a bunch of thugs to kidnap you. Instead, they send a black luxury car on a rainy night to your doorstep. Then, in a lavishly decorated room, they sit behind a black office desk, dressed impeccably, with an attitude that's polite and refined as they engage with you. They don't look like your typical gang. They resemble more of an old-fashioned aristocracy, all influenced by Falcone. This is what makes Maroney feel ashamed, because unlike others, he has always believed he'd never succumb to the Godfather's power. He sees himself as the one destined to overthrow Falcone, but he can't deny that he has been emulating the Godfather all along. Yet, his imitation falls short. Maroney doesn't fit into a suit the way the Godfather does. He lacks that refined air that the Godfather effortlessly exudes. Even in a well-tailored suit, he can't conceal his roughness. But Falcone represents the most glorious era of Gotham's gangs. His every move carries the mark of that boiling period, a demeanor that suggests mastery over everything. It captivates Maroney. He harbors malicious intentions to replace the Godfather, but like everyone else in Gotham, he also holds deep respect for him. Gordon observes Maroney's silence and says, "Do you know? Even before entering this door, I knew it couldn't be the Godfather inviting me. Despite using his favorite car model and the most common method of invitation." "Is that so?" Maroney inquires. Because why? If it were Falcone inviting me today, I wouldn't be searched, and my guns wouldn't be confiscated. The Godfather doesn't care if I'm armed when I meet him, because he's much more confident than you. Maroney is struggling to maintain his facade. Every word Gordon speaks pierces his heart. Everything Gordon says is true. When Falcone invites someone to talk, he never disarms them, even if they are notorious killers. He dares to sit behind a table, less than 2 meters away from them, unarmed, and persuades them with words alone. But Maroney doesn't dare. How can he allow a well-trained old cop with a gun to approach him within 2 meters? He has no certainty, and he must be wary of Gordon's sudden attack. He doesn't even understand why Falcone can do it. Why is the Godfather so confident that no one he meets would dare harm him? Maroney has never understood this. In his view, one mistake, and all his efforts would be in vain under the sound of gunfire. He won't give anyone that chance. He feels his caution is justified, but it doesn't stop him from feeling a sense of impending defeat. He says in a low voice to Gordon, "Do you think your actions here are wise? Provoking me repeatedly on my own turf? Are you dropping the act now?" Gordon asks. "Just now, your words were no different from a street thug's. You didn't use any sophisticated vocabulary. Is it because you think I've seen through the truth, so there's no need to pretend anymore?" Maroney waves his hand, and behind him, there's a distinct click as a shotgun is loaded. The man in the suit behind him points it straight at Gordon. Gordon shakes his head and says, "This is where you differ from Falcone. You brought me here supposedly to discuss business, but in this world, there's no reason to resort to violence if a deal can't be struck. You're still playing by the old gang rules. If I don't agree with you, you'll point a gun at me and force me to comply." "That's enough," Maroney says, taking a deep breath. He gestures, and the man behind him lowers the gun. He continues, "You're clever, you know I don't want to lose to Falcone. Your cleverness saved your life tonight, Commissioner Gordon. I can let you leave tonight, not because I'm imitating anyone, but because I'm being merciful and giving you a chance to think. If you change your mind, you know where to find me." As Gordon leaves the mansion, he is almost soaked in cold sweat. Only he knows how dangerous the situation was just now. If it weren't for his repeated provocations of Maroney using Falcone, it's questionable whether he would have made it out of the mansion unscathed. The cold wind of Gotham blows against him, and the fine raindrops strike his face. Slowly, he walks back, thinking that perhaps the trouble is far from over. Episode 79, Heart as Stubborn as a Stone, 2. Gordon and Barbara returned home after a heated argument. Barbara had waited for him until late, sitting alone in the pitch-black room with a cold dinner on the table. It was a meal Barbara had carefully prepared to celebrate their upcoming purchase of their first home. Unfortunately, the most important character was missing from this dinner. Barbara knew Gordon was busy, but she also knew that his relentless work had nothing to do with his competence. It was because the place he worked in simply didn't need a cop. Barbara, who had accompanied Gordon all the way, was well aware that with Gordon's abilities, he wouldn't have to toil so hard in any city other than Gotham. More importantly, Barbara knew that even if Gordon worked tirelessly, it would be in vain. He couldn't save this place. When Gordon returned, Barbara was sitting on the sofa, gently caressing a photograph. It was a picture taken after their internship, where both Gordon and she looked very young, almost like children. Back then, they were both under 20 years old, and their relationship had just been established for less than 2 months. They had gotten drunk at a party and talked about their ambitions. Barbara came from a troubled family and wanted to earn money to improve the lives of her parents and siblings. Gordon, on the other hand, was born into a moderately well-off middle-class family. He had dreamed of becoming a righteous cop from a young age, because the police had once saved his family. Despite their differing aspirations, they fell in love, and even years of a long-distance relationship hadn't dulled their feelings. But on this particular night, it seemed like a buildup of emotions had erupted all at once. Barbara sat on the sofa, silently shedding tears, while Gordon stood at the doorway in silence. It wasn't that he didn't want to console Barbara, nor was he indifferent to seeing his beloved fiancée cry alone. He knew that Barbara was about to ask a question, and he also knew that he couldn't answer that question. Why did he insist on staying in Gotham? Gordon wasn't a native of Gotham, he was born in Chicago. He wasn't from a poor background, quite the opposite, growing up in relative affluence. He wasn't a genius, but most of his achievements came from his hard work. From his teachers to his classmates, to his fiancée who spent her days and nights with him, none of them understood why Gordon had given up a promising future at the Chicago Police Department to come to this godforsaken place called Gotham, and to stay here for years. Gordon hadn't achieved anything significant within the Gotham Police Department. His promotions had been slow, and after several years, he was still just the leader of a small unit. He hadn't cracked any major cases, and even when he had contributed to certain investigations, the credit never landed on his shoulders. Not to mention making a difference or bringing change to Gotham. But it was as if Gordon had been enchanted by some ghostly spell. He insisted on remaining here. Whenever his former teachers and classmates talked about him, they wore expressions of regret. In their eyes, if only Gordon could be a bit more flexible, his accomplishments would far exceed what they were now. Gordon approached Barbara and embraced her. She had been crying all along, but she didn't ask anything because she knew that the question she wanted to ask the most was one that Gordon had never answered. When faced with the choice between his badge and his loved one, Gordon always remained silent. Gotham's nights were never short of tears, but Barbara's tears were different. Few people here shed tears for their lovers. The heat in their hearts was barely enough to warm themselves, let alone shed tears for something as elusive as love. Having witnessed countless nights of weeping in Gotham, Barbara's sorrow and tears made Gordon even more uncomfortable. He felt like he had become a worse villain than the criminals themselves. He thought that when he decided to live in this abyss, he shouldn't expect anyone on the surface to pay much attention to him. Even if there were such people, their ultimate fate would be to shed tears for him, just like the cold rain that fell on him on Gotham's late nights. But these tears were ultimately in vain, and the tears of countless lovers were as numerous as the raindrops, unable to change the stubborn stone. The next day, Harvey visited Schiller again, which surprised Schiller. Harvey was always very formal and rarely made unannounced visits. Harvey said, "Gordon came to me yesterday, hoping I could find a legal counsel job for his fiancée, preferably in Metropolis or another southern city. I could tell his mental state wasn't right, so I came to you." It's not just a simple argument between him and his fiancée. They had already bought a house and even planned to have children, but now Gordon seems to want to break up with Barbara. Something's not right. Schiller trusted Harvey's intuition, but when he called Gordon, there was no answer. When he called Gordon's police station, his colleagues told Schiller that the hard-working detective who had put in extra hours for years had surprisingly not shown up for work that afternoon. Schiller had a bad feeling and quickly contacted Gordon's partner, Batman. Last night, Gordon had thought all night, and in the early morning of the next day, he told Barbara they should break up. To help Barbara leave Gotham as soon as possible, he asked senior lawyer Harvey to find her a new job, preferably as far away from Gotham as possible. Gordon was just an ordinary person, and the emotional impact of breaking up with his longtime girlfriend nearly pushed him to the brink. At the police station, he couldn't focus on work all morning, and by lunchtime, when everyone had gone out to eat, the empty office was unbearable for Gordon. Feeling mentally disoriented, he walked out of the police station, hoping to find a place with more people, so he wouldn't be consumed by the despairing sadness. But fate had other plans, just as he expected. His troubles were far from over. He hadn't been out for long when he realized someone was tailing him. Gordon's wits sharpened a bit, and he wanted to get back to the police station where there were guards with heavy weapons, making it difficult for anyone to invade. However, his pursuers were cunning. When Gordon noticed several unfriendly faces watching him from ahead on the road, he knew continuing forward would lead to no good results. He only had a handgun with him, and while the magazine was full, the handgun's stopping power was limited. Relying on his familiarity with the terrain, Gordon turned right into an alley and hid in a blind spot behind a corner. This tactic proved ineffective as his pursuers were evidently familiar with the area too. When they saw Gordon turn right, they immediately followed. The footsteps outside the alley grew closer, and as the sky gradually darkened, Gordon calculated the time. When the footsteps reached the alley entrance, in a moment when their visibility was at its worst due to the fading light, Gordon fired a shot at the alley's entrance. Upon realizing that his bullets had missed their mark, Gordon immediately abandoned his initial plan. He knew that his pursuers across the way were undoubtedly well-trained assassins who would not be swayed by changes in their line of sight. In swift response, he holstered his gun and sprinted backward. 2 gunshots echoed from behind, and what struck Gordon as peculiar was the muffled sound of those shots, indicative of suppressors. Gordon promptly understood that this group was not composed of locals from Gotham. Gotham's assassins did not use suppressors on their guns, it held no purpose. In Gotham, nobody would react differently to gunshots, it was akin to putting earmuffs on a deaf person. With this realization, Gordon formulated a new plan in his mind. His pursuers were closing in on him, evidently possessing superior stamina and speed. Gordon reached the end of a narrow alley and swiftly climbed a nearby wall. As he reached the top of the perimeter wall, his pursuers arrived. In that frozen moment, a gunshot rang out, striking Gordon. He tumbled over the wall and fell into a courtyard. The bullet hit his arm, causing injury but not fatal harm. Gordon clutched his wounded arm and continued running forward, shouting, "The Black Tower gang is attacking! They're shooting! They're shooting!" The courtyard belonged to a nightclub, and upon hearing Gordon's words, people immediately rushed out, surrounding the person who had been chasing Gordon. At this moment, Gordon had just climbed over the wall and was temporarily immobilized. He was immediately hit by 3 or 4 bullets. Gotham's rule of engagement was straightforward: shoot first, ask questions later, regardless of visibility or the identity of the target. Once the target was down, then they would talk. However, Gordon's crisis was far from over. It was evident that the ones pursuing him were a group, and the first person he had shaken off was just an appetizer. Shortly after, he ran into the street and saw a car speeding towards him. It seemed they had multiple plans, or perhaps their intention all along was to drive Gordon onto the road and then use the car to finish him off. Gordon rolled to the right, and the car missed him. However, a gun emerged from the car like a black hole, and Gordon was shot again, this time in the back, eliciting a scream. Despite the excruciating pain, Gordon's mind remained clear. He knew that if he continued running, he'd be caught within minutes. He gritted his teeth, holding his chest with one arm due to the intense pain. His other arm was bleeding from the gunshot wound. Following his memory, Gordon reached the back door of an apartment building. The door's lock was broken and seldom closed properly. He tugged at it with his one functional arm, but the pain in his chest made every movement agonizing. Gordon's breathing grew heavier. Finally, the door cracked open slightly. Gordon wasn't particularly tall or muscular, but he managed to squeeze through the gap. Inside, he didn't stop. He climbed a short section of stairs, ripped open a nearby corridor window, and climbed onto the roof with all his might. He shut the window behind him and hit on the roof's ledge on the second floor. As he heard the pounding on the door below, Gordon bit his lip. He slid down the ledge, landing on a canopy below without leaving a trace of blood, despite the bullet wound on his forehead. After dropping onto the canopy, Gordon used his last ounce of strength to roll onto the ground, concealing himself among garbage bags. After a while, he heard the footsteps inside the building fading away. His pursuers hadn't found him, it seemed they had left. Gordon lay in a pile of trash, each breath carrying a heavy metallic scent. The gunshot had pierced his lung. His arm was numb from blood loss, but he could still feel the engagement ring on his ring finger, slowly blending with the cold metal. He recalled the look of disbelief and heartbreak on Barbara's face when they had parted ways. He thought, Barbara was right. He was a fool, an irredeemable one, incapable of change, destined to die alone. A wave of coldness he couldn't resist swept over him, followed by a warm surge from within his body. Fresh blood from the wound on his forehead flowed into his eyes, staining his vision red and shrouding it in darkness. Soon, Gotham began to rain again. Today's rain was no different from any other night's rain in Gotham, fine and chilling. Gordon's consciousness began to blur, like a trapped beast in the abyss. The lover's tears falling from above couldn't save his fading life. But they reminded him of the tears of his loved ones, and a resolute emotion surged within him. He thought, if he was destined to be an inflexible fool, he'd rather exhaust his life in this mire, with a heart as unyielding as a stone. He would die here, alone, with decayed wind sweeping over his bones, erasing all traces of his existence. And when facing this endless darkness, his last bit of soul would still resist, refusing to kneel. Gordon thought, let him stay here, against all odds, until dawn. Episode 80, In the Name of the Father. When Gordon woke up in the dimly lit hospital room, only a small desk lamp was on, and Schiller was dozing off in the chair next to him. Hearing Gordon's movements, he woke up and took off his glasses, saying, I knew you'd wake up when I was with you. Gordon couldn't speak now, as he had a breathing apparatus on. Schiller said, you were badly injured, a bit too badly. We barely saved your life after more than 20 hours of rescue, and whether you can fully recover is still unknown. The psychologist's voice always carried a calming power. Gordon blinked his eyes, unable to do much else. Schiller yawned and said, thanks to your partner, he arrived in time to save your life. But I'm sorry, the people who were chasing you were apparently after me. Gordon shook his head slightly. He knew these people were just hired killers. Even if Maroni didn't hire them, he would hire others. Just as Schiller was about to continue speaking, the door opened and Harvey walked in, saying, Are you awake? Schiller nodded and stood up from the chair. Harvey said, I'll take over, you go rest. Before leaving, Schiller took a look at Gordon. The detective who usually looked full of energy now appeared incredibly haggard. The double torment of body and mind had left him somewhat mentally confused. The late-night corridor of the central hospital was pitch black, and only the sound of Schiller's leather shoes echoed clearly. As he arrived downstairs, a car was parked at the hospital entrance, and a tall man in a suit got out and opened the car door for Schiller. After Schiller got in, he said, Let's have some jazz. Soon, some lively jazz began playing, adding a bit of fresh air to the dull atmosphere inside the car. The lights outside still flickered. Schiller closed his eyes with drowsiness, and the person sitting in the passenger seat obviously didn't expect him to fall asleep so quickly. This professor was truly extraordinary, he thought. When the car arrived at its destination, Schiller had not fully awakened from his drowsiness. The brief nap had left him feeling even more tired. Ascending the wooden stairs, Schiller entered the room where Falcone was seated behind a desk in his usual suit and shoes. Evan stood behind his father, also in a suit. Schiller sat down opposite the godfather, made the sign of the cross on his chest, and greeted him with, "Good evening, godfather." Falcone waved his hand and the tall man in the suit approached. Falcone retrieved a box of cigars from under the desk and his assistant cut one for Schiller. Schiller was about to refuse, but Falcone said, "I heard you like to smoke cigars. I happen to like them too. So have one." Schiller adjusted his posture and leaned back in the chair, making no attempt to hide his fatigue. He accepted the cigar, and Evans approached to light it for him. Schiller looked at him and said, "I've never seen you in a suit before. You'll have a lot of girls chasing after you at the ball." Evans smiled humbly and said nothing as he returned to his father's side. "You've changed a lot, I can tell," Falcone said. The godfather was still elegant as he smoked his cigar, taking a small puff before exhaling and speaking again. "When I first met you, I knew you weren't from Gotham. But now you're much better. That's good. When you're on guard here, you'll find that everyone is against you. But when you truly consider this place as your home, you'll find that anyone can find like-minded people here. Perhaps because everyone is a potential criminal," Schiller said. "What surprises me about you is that you don't question why I didn't take care of Maroni," Falcone replied. Schiller's voice was low as he said, "Maroni is not important. You always amaze me. I've met too many people in my lifetime, seen too many geniuses. They often have a sense of superiority, even if they appear humble on the surface. But I know that their deference is only out of fear of my gun. But I know for a fact that people fear Godfather not because of a gun. You've shown me the allure of psychology. You always seem to provide the answers I want," Falcone said, letting his cigar burn slowly in his hand. "I hope Evans can learn the essence of this subject, but unfortunately, I know he doesn't have the talent for it. He's doing well academically." Schiller flicked off some ash from his cigar, saying, "He's hardworking and a good student. But that's about it, isn't it?" Falcone asked. Schiller didn't seem to care about Evans' disappointed expression, and he said, "That's a good thing, Your Excellency Godfather. Studying psychology is a dead end." Falcone looked at him, and Schiller took another puff of his cigar, before saying, "It's not a strange metaphor. When you delve deep into this subject, you'll only end up with two outcomes, either madness or death. Then it seems you haven't chosen either." "Perhaps I've chosen both?" Schiller replied. Schiller began to feel increasingly sleepy. The sweet and pungent scent of tobacco caused waves of drowsiness to wash over him. He squinted his eyes, and the whole world's light blurred into a white haze. "I know Evans has a long way to go. Like his mother, he's not an absolute good guy, nor can he be an absolute bad guy. That's the scariest thing," he said. "What kind of person do you want him to be?" Falcone hadn't even had a chance to answer before Schiller continued, "Or should I say, do you want him to become the Godfather?" Falcone fell silent. It was clear he had an answer in his heart, but he didn't want to admit it. Is becoming the Godfather a good thing? After all these years as the Godfather, Falcone couldn't even give an answer. "What happened to the cop?" he asked. Schiller shook his head and said, "He was badly injured. It may take a long time for him to recover. You could have let him lean towards Maroni, and I wouldn't have blamed him," Falcone said. "I know these people don't have a choice. Either cooperate or die. In fact, just being able to survive until now has impressed me. Perhaps it's offensive, but his perseverance isn't because of the Godfather. Then what is it because of? If it's not because he fears me, why did he resist Maroni's offer to cooperate? Because Maroni prevented him from going out to fight crime. So what? He's a cop, and he believes it's only natural for the police to catch criminals. A very naive idea, isn't it? It even seems absurd in this city. Good people never live long, especially in Gotham," Falcone sighed. "That's why I'll be your longest-serving family teacher," Schiller said. Falcone closed his eyes, and after a while, he said, "Evans, go kill Maroni. Kill him with your own hands." Evans pursed his lips and said in a low voice, "Yes, father. As for those people coming from the metropolis, I'll handle them. You don't need to trouble yourself. What's your plan?" "I've made a lot of money lately, and there's a highly priced super mercenary whose price is just right for me." "I'll pay for it," Falcone said. "In your name, may Gotham be blessed by God." It seems that this Godfather is really old, and he really loves his son. He believes that in the decades of his life before Godfather, he has never been so friendly to anyone. Indeed, in the glorious years of Godfather's past, he didn't need to express himself like this to anyone, and no one dared to ask him to do so. But today, he can invite Schiller here and show him such goodwill, which shows that he is really getting old. Schiller thought so, his drowsiness deepening. Falcone looked at the man opposite him, gradually closing his eyes. Godfather sighed and said to Evans, "Take your teacher back to rest." Evans should be the godfather. He stood up and looked out of the window. Outside the window was the quiet night of Gotham. From Falcone Manor, he could see the faint light of the lighthouse on the coast. 40 years had passed, he thought. The friends and enemies of the Godfather had all faded away with time. His life and years had come to an end along with the previous era of Gotham. Only this lighthouse still shone all night long, witnessing the wind and frost, the rise and fall of the city, along with him. Evans looked at his father behind him. Falcone's figure showed no signs of aging, still standing tall and wearing a suit that always looked elegant. Finally, the Godfather extinguished the cigar in his hand and said, "I only hope that he will truly be the longest-lasting family tutor for you." On the docks of Gotham's East District, the sea reflected the light of the lighthouse, and the waves surged like a golden school of fish. A cargo ship left the harbor under the cover of darkness. The smell of blood on the deck had not yet dissipated. The bodies of the crew members were thrown into the cold sea. A burly man standing at the bow spat on the ground and said, "We suffered a big loss this time, lost a few men and didn't earn any money." "Don't worry about it, at least we escaped," replied another person beside him. Suddenly, as they hadn't sailed far from the harbor, a muffled bell rang from Gotham City. The bell rang 7 times with a noticeable tremor. The leader at the bow asked in confusion, "Why are they ringing the bell in the middle of the night?" "Who knows? Maybe it's a farewell to us," shrugged the person beside him. A faint sound came from above, and then a figure in black and yellow appeared on the mast. "It's indeed a farewell to you, a funeral bell."